The following program is presented by the Metropolitan Library Service Agency.
Hello, welcome to All About Kids, a program focusing on the interests of children and young people and some of the issues affecting them. Our guest today is Jean Illsley Clarke, parent, educator, and author. She'll be talking with Rhonda Smith, a member of the Minnesota chapter of the National Parenting Association. The topic of their discussion is over-indulgence. How do parents give things to their children that they need to build self-esteem and competencies, but not over-indulge the children?
There's a wonderful book out called Growing Up Again by Jean Illsley Clarke. And on this book, she does some wonderful workshops on growing up again. But from those workshops and from this book, a topic of indulgence has been brought to your attention and studied on. Jean, what is indulgence?
Indulgence, according to the dictionary, can have two meanings. One is one that I would call abundance. Like right now I'm seeing some articles and ideas that say, well, indulge yourself, meaning take care of yourself in extra special ways. Mm-hmm. But most of the definitions are what we will call overindulgence. And that's when you have so much of something that it becomes a hazard or it does harm.
So there is a difference between indulgence and overindulgence.
Well, I used to use the words interchangeably, but now I'm saying overindulgence when I mean the negative part, because people who haven't had enough in life will say to me, but I need a little indulgence. You know, well, a little indulgence is a very different thing from consistent overindulgence. So I'm trying now to talk about overindulgence.
Oh, that's interesting. What kind of research have you done to base this information on?
When Connie Dawson and I were writing the book Growing Up Again, we did research with several people who were overindulged. And as a result of that, and what I found out from that, I got interested in it. And so I then did in-depth interviews with more than 30 people who have been severely overindulged, so that it was a problem to them and they wanted to talk about it and get some help with it and so forth.
Oh, that's really interesting. So did they come to you and you talked about their overindulgence, and were they like cured from their overindulgence? Or
yes. You're funny. When I was doing a workshop on growing up again, or sometimes just on overindulgence, like the fine line between love and overindulgence, then I would say I'm doing research on overindulgence, and so if you're an adult who was overindulged and you want to participate in this, let me know. And then one of the first things that I found out about was how secretive people have become about it, because they would come up and say, like, I'm one of them. Can we have lunch? And I thought, what is this about? And then they explained to me that if you were beaten or you were criticized and you tell someone, the person says, what? I'm sorry.
Yeah.
Oh, I'm sorry. You know, how you doing? If you tell someone that you were overindulged, if you say, well, when I was a child, I got everything I wanted.
Spoiled.
Right. Right away.
And not only are you spoiled, you're a brat.
Right. Or I wish I'd been there, or you were lucky. And so they have been ridiculed for it so much that they've learned not to talk about it, which may be one reason we don't really have much data on it. We have lots of opinions. So now Dr. David Bredehoff and I, in this spring of 1995, are doing research on a much broader base, more
Oh.
numbers. And we're comparing the perceptions of people who were overindulged with those who were not. And we're also collecting more data about what happens to people as adults if they were overindulged, consistently overindulged as children.
Okay. What does indulgence teach children?
Well, overindulgence teaches the child whatever that child decides. So it might be different for different children. But the items that have come up again and again are, I deserve it. The world owes me. I don't really have to put forth effort. People should know what I want. My needs and wants come first. What I want, I should have right now. Some even, you should know what I want, and if you don't, I'll blame you.
So there's a real attitude here.
Yeah. And then with some other children, it turned out to be a fear, like, how come I've got so much and other people haven't?
Oh.
And maybe having been teased or ridiculed for that.
And a little competition.
Yeah, yeah. Or other kids doing like sour grapes, you know. And then sometimes empathy, like I wondered why I had so much and other kids didn't.
Okay. Empathy, I'm learning more and more every day that that's a very important thing to teach children.
Oh, yes.
What kind of decisions or thoughts do children who are indulged have about themselves?
Well, first of all, I don't know. I mean, I can't say this is how it is. But it seems from the interviews so far that at least some of them get a mix-up between what I have and who I am.
So there's a self-esteem issue here.
Oh yeah, definitely. And we've talked a lot about people deciding who they are is what they do. You know, like I'm only worthwhile if I'm producing, and if I say, who are you, you say what you do. But with some of these people, it is who I am is what I get. And so then this sets up needing something more all the time.
So that could lead into drug abuse and selfishness and wanting more and more.
Let's see now. It would look like selfishness. It would actually be an attempt to stay alive, to feel okay. What leads into drug abuse, as far as we can tell, is pain. And so I think that drug abuse from overindulgence, like from any other cause, is about a way to ease the pain. And it does for a while. This is why it's so very seductive.
What kinds of effects does indulgence have on children then, with the negative, the self-esteem, when they go out into the world or day by day?
As children?
As children, what kind of effects does this have on them on a regular, daily basis?
Let's go back now for a second. First of all, children can be indulged in many, many ways. So if we look at a child who is overindulged with clothing and toys,
okay,
and computer programs and so forth, versus a child who is overindulged with freedom, we might see different results with them and their peers.
Freedom as in lack of discipline?
Yeah,
okay.
Lack of discipline, lack of rules, lack of structure.
Oh, okay.
And so for the child who has many toys, too many toys, this might show up in one way. It might be jealousy on the part of other kids, or it might be kids latching on to be friends because they want access to the toys. Whereas if it's too much freedom, this would look different. This would attract another kind of kid who wanted that permission to break the rules that he or she had.
Speaking of the toys and the clothing and a lot of materialistic things that kids have and what's out there in the media or the world today, if indulgence is giving too much, too soon, too long, are these children victims of an upper middle class or upper class society?
Wouldn't that be fun if they were? Because then we could just say it's just those kids.
Yeah.
But we don't have any evidence that that's true.
So it's not just a materialistic give
No.
too much.
No. No.
It's-
It goes completely across the board in terms of income and socioeconomic level.
Okay. Now you've also traveled all over the world. Have you seen this indulgence in other parts of the world too?
Well, I was hoping that it was just an American phenomenon and we could just work on it here. But I've made presentations on it in Australia and in England and in New Zealand. And when I talked about it this spring in Singapore, they went, yeah, we've got it too. And then I was at an international conference in Singapore, and the people from China said, oh, it's just rampant there because they were accustomed to very large families and not enough material goods. And then if you have one child, then the tendency is to overindulge that child because everything is invested in that child.
You're really focused.
Yeah, and I even have from a publication called China Woman a list of don'ts for raising children. And there are 10, and 8 of them are about one aspect or another of don't overindulge.
Oh, wow.
And so they're seeing that full force. And each one has a reason. And then one of the ones that's not about overindulgence is don't hit your child because a spanking teaches children to be fearful. That's interesting, huh?
That's a whole nother
Yeah, but there's
chapter.
1 on that and 8 on one aspect or another of don't overindulge. So they're certainly seeing that as a problem.
Well, and this sounds like it's pretty serious, something that parents really should look into and focus on.
Well, at least
or
I think we
learn.
need to think about it. And of course, nothing is all one way, and unfortunately there's very seldom a simple solution.
Mm-hmm.
But one of the things that attracted Connie and me as we were doing our initial research is how engaging and attractive some of these adults who are overindulged as children can be.
Oh, really?
Yeah, and I think I made this up, I don't know. You know, you look at people and things and you make things up, so I just made this up. This is just my opinion. But my opinion is that with some kids who were responded to and got a lot of what they wanted, what they learned is that I'm going to have a good time. And so they approach you with this way of being. And of course that's very engaging because I like to have a good time, and so I like to be with somebody who wants to have a good time.
Mm-hmm.
And so there's a part of many of them that's very engaging. They're fun to be with. And then the other part is that they may think that we should do it right now, no matter what else I had going on. You know, and then I
Oh.
have to say, well, no, I can't go to lunch right now. I had other plans.
A little
Oh, but I'm
self-discipline.
in town. You know, well, then I'll come this afternoon at 3. Well, no, my afternoon is filled. Well, then we'll have dinner together. You know, and part of me really wants to because it would be fun. And another part of me says, but I already have a commitment. So there's that two-sided piece to it. But I think it would be dangerous for us to say that there is a behavior or an attitude that comes out of it, because it will be individual with the person.
Okay. Oh, that's very interesting. Can you give us some examples of what parents do when they indulge their children and what parents can do instead?
Yeah. It wouldn't really be any good if we didn't know what to do instead. One example that comes to mind right now is, well, let me say first that the parents I have talked with who do overindulge, and I think that all of us do sometimes. I mean, I suppose that all parents overindulge sometime every week. But I'm talking about this as a consistent pattern, that there's too much often, that it goes on too long in many areas. What I find is that they overindulge for what I consider good reasons, like goodness of their heart reasons.
Okay.
Like, I want my child to be happy, or I didn't have it and I don't want my child to go without, or I want peace in the family. That overindulgence comes from a good part of us, and that it comes maybe sometimes to make us look good, but even that has a good part of it, you know, that we want our family to look good, and that it's just too much. So it's like a mom who said, I feel so guilty because I'm not home with my children, that I buy them a toy every day on the way home from work, but I don't spend much.
Okay.
See, so she felt as if because she wasn't throwing the family finances or doing what we call giving a disproportionate amount to this child, that what she was doing was making up for not being there. Well, toys and love do not equate. Toys and time do not equate. And so here are children who have lost some of their ability to be creative because they've got so many toys, and so many toys that do it all, that it turns out to be overindulgence. But she did it for a good reason, from a good heart.
What about in the media and the newspaper ads? I see it all over the place. Buy this, buy that. You know, here's a trend that these kids are going through as far, you know, with toys and clothing and backyard play accessories and lots of different paraphernalia for kids growing up. For older kids, a lot of them at the age of 16 are looking for a car to drive to school when we have a transportation department to get them to school. How does this peer pressure or media pressure, materialistic toy pressure affect overindulgence, and how parents can deal with that without falling into this pattern?
Yes, no, maybe, I don't know. I mean, yeah, this is a whole lot of questions, and they're hard questions, and I think they're very important ones.
Well, it just seems like a lot of parents are struggling with this kind of stuff, especially when your child comes home from school and says, well, so-and-so's got, you know, this brand, or
everybody's got it.
Oh, yeah, that is, you know, my children.
Well, I had your children. I'm thinking about a trip that my husband and I took to China in 1980, when they were out of the Cultural Revolution only 2 years, when almost every school in the country had been closed, and most of the teachers had been killed or were no longer functioning. And at that time, 2 years out of the Cultural Revolution, I was in classrooms where there were nothing but children, chairs, and a teacher. No books.
Oh my gosh.
Nothing. And the kids acted happy.
Oh, that's
I
very
saw
interesting.
children on the streets. And in the time that I was there on the streets, I saw only 2 toys. One was discarded thread spools from a knitting factory. And one was a very small crab hung on a string. And this little kid was putting the string down, and then the crab would start to run off, and then he'd pull the string up, and then putting it down. And other than that, the children made their own toys, if they had toys, out of whatever was on the ground.
Oh,
But they looked and acted happy.
they weren't deprived.
They didn't seem to be deprived. They were also clean and well dressed, warm enough.
Mm-hmm.
Now, none of them had a brand label, of course.
You find out that that's not necessary.
No. And so what they had that was enough in that setting wouldn't be enough for a child living here.
Mm-mm.
So part of what's so hard about enough is where you are and what other people have. And of course the kids use this on us. They come home and say, everybody has da-da-da-da-da. And when we create needs in children, as we do with advertising, then this makes parenting more difficult. In fact, I think that right now, in order to be a good parent, you have to be counterculture. And that means that you have a difficult job.
Counterculture means
countercultural. Because there are going to be other parents who don't agree with you about what's needed.
mm-hmm.
Someone said to me the other day, I'm so sorry my grandchild can't have a tricycle. And I said, why can't your grandchild have a tricycle? She said, no one has tricycles now. They only have bikes with training wheels. And tricycles were so much better. And I said, well, couldn't you give your grandchild a tricycle? Well, she said, yes, but he couldn't ride it on the block because the other children all have bicycles.
Oh.
Well, this is tremendous pressure that parents put on each other.
And it's also giving messages to the children, too.
Yeah, it is.
I have to keep up with
Yeah.
everyone else.
So the issue used to be that the child is learning balance, large motor skills, something about power and independence, riding this little tricycle, learning lots of things about safety, etc. And now we are saying to the child, you still have to learn all those things, but you have to learn it on a machine on which it's more difficult to learn it, because a bike with training wheels is not as stable for a very young child to use. And you have to do that because really the parents have colluded with the media. The media doesn't do it. The media tells us to do it, but we are the ones who lay down the credit card or who open the wallet or who write the check.
Yeah, we are
Isn't
the ones.
that disgusting that we can't blame it on other people?
I'm ripping up my credit cards. We've got about 5 minutes left, and I have a personal question that I would like to ask you, and that is about rewards.
Yeah.
Is rewarding children indulging? For example, when they're younger, you give them a treat while they're toilet training, or when they're older, giving them $5 for getting a good grade in school. I mean, after all, they worked hard for that, and they deserve it.
I worked hard getting dinner. Did they pay me for that?
Never. I've never been paid.
So this is the first thing you look at. Are you creating an imbalance of expectations that when the child does what children normally should do, they get paid for it?
Good question.
Yeah. So this would be one way of looking at it.
Okay.
Another way would be, we all need rewards. We all need strokes, in the sense that we need recognition. So let's help children recognize that recognition does not mean pay. If that $5 can be a recognition, that's one thing. If it's like you're getting paid for getting the grade, come on. So maybe what we need to think about you and I can think about this, is have we mixed up rewards with celebrations?
Oh.
Because it's one thing to celebrate that your child passed the driver test.
Mm-hmm.
It's another thing to reward them for it or to pay them for it. So what I'm thinking more and more about is that our job is to teach children to celebrate their accomplishments, and then to not always have to have the celebration come from the outside, but that as they grow, they learn to have that internal satisfaction. And I expect that if the food reward or the sticker or the money helps them to do that, then it's okay. If it teaches them that they should be paid for everything they do, then I think we've set up an expectation that's going to really harm them later on, because there are going to be a lot of places in life where they're not going to be paid to do what they should do.
Mm-hmm.
Does that make sense?
It makes a lot of sense. So we want our children to feel good about themselves for what they've done.
Yeah.
To wrap up, Jean, I'm going to be attending a workshop April 11th for this Indulgence, and you've got another one coming up in May. But you do workshops throughout the year on growing up again and Indulgence. And for people that are interested in these workshops, what kind of things can they expect to get out of the workshops? Is it like, for example, some parenting techniques on how to deal with indulgence?
Well, when I do a workshop on over-indulgence, what I hope people will get is an expanded framework about what it is and why people do it, with some love, not some shame or blame, because we do it from goodness. And then options of things to do instead that are going to be healthier for the kids, that are going to help the kids meet their developmental tasks, rather than having us take those tasks away by giving them too much of something, too much of anything. And generally we do some kind of practice as well as talking about it.
So we work on our honesty and what really goes on in our homes and
well, yeah, only we do that in our heads because, you know, it's important, I think, when we go to a workshop to have open-ended questions where we can think about how it will work at our house with our child. Not that we get 1, 2, 3 things which might work with somebody's child at some home, but that we get a framework so we can think about it for ourselves.
Well, thank you so much for your time, and a great thanks for the studies that you've done, the research that you've done, and the books that you have written. I know that I've been a parent for 13 years, and every month I pick up something that you've written and studied on to help me through my parenting, and I deeply appreciate it, and thank you so much.
That's just lovely. You're welcome.
Thank you, Jean Illsley Clarke and Rhonda Smith. A good, practical, common sense discussion of ways that parents can give to their children but not overindulge them. Thanks to all of you for joining us in All About Kids. Please tune in again.
This has been a presentation of Hennepin County Library in conjunction with the Twin Cities Metropolitan Library Service Agency.